"I can't find my mother," said the blind alien girl, until a human finally helped her. Rain drifted down the transparent walkways of Aurelian Reach, blurring the floating city into bands of silver and light. Above the turquoise ocean, thousands of glass corridors connected the colony's vertical towers, levels stacked by class, by function, by who mattered. On one of the mid-tier pedestrian bridges, a small alien girl stood alone, her bare feet pressed against the cold glass. Her skin was lavender with a faint bluish sheen, and her long white hair clung to her back, heavy with rain. Her eyes, milky, almost colorless, didn't focus on anything. She moved her head by sound instead, flinching whenever someone passed too close. In her arms, she held a doll sewn from torn synth fabric and discarded thread. It was missing one arm. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small. "Please, I can't find my mother." No one stopped. Workers brushed past, boots splashing through puddles. A man in a pressed uniform muttered something about unregistered street strays. Two young women slowed, stared for a moment, then turned away. The girl turned in circles, trying to follow the sounds, but the noise of the colony overwhelmed everything. The turbines beneath, the announcements above, the echo of people's shoes on glass. She took a shaky breath and started walking again, holding her doll like a guide. Then a sound different from the others, steady footsteps, not hurried, not impatient, approached. A man in a dark hydrolab jacket stopped a few steps away. He was human, mid-30s tall, lean. His short hair was dark, damp from the rain. There was something calm in how he moved, measured, economical. His eyes were gray, watchful, the kind of eyes that had spent too long studying small details for a living. His name was Dr. Elias Ward, a field botanist recently reassigned from Terra's equatorial research stations to Aurelian Reach's upper hydroponic division. He'd come here to repair the failing nutrient system in the colony's food towers. Officially, his task was simple: restore balance to the crop's oxygen exchange levels. Unofficially, he was here to figure out why every replacement worker before him had quit within months. Some quietly transferred, some dismissed. The place had a reputation for indifference that seeped into everything. He noticed the girl right away, not because of pity, but because no one else did. She stood stiff, shivering, lips pale from cold. When she turned her head toward him, her empty gaze hit him harder than he expected. "Hey," he said quietly, crouching so he didn't tower over her. "You're lost." Her fingers tightened on the doll. "I can't find my mother." Her voice trembled, but it wasn't a whine. It was exhaustion. He glanced around. The bridge stretched empty, the glow from the tower signs reflecting off the wet glass. No security drones, no caretakers, just a crowd pretending the child wasn't there. He felt a small weight settle in his stomach, the kind that meant a decision had already been made. "All right," he said, keeping his tone calm. "We'll look for her." She turned her face toward his voice. "People say that, but they leave. I won't." Her expression didn't change. She didn't know how to believe that yet. He extended his hand, open, palm up. She hesitated, then reached forward slowly, touching his fingers like she was memorizing them. "You're warm," she said. "So are you," he replied. He lifted her easily, supported her back with one arm. She didn't resist, just rested her head against his chest, clutching her doll. As he carried her through the walkway, rain hissed against the transparent canopy overhead. From this height, the ocean below looked motionless, a cold blue mirror. His boots echoed softly. Around them, commuters kept their pace, ignoring both of them. Elias felt the pulse of irritation tighten in his chest. Not at them, but at how normal their indifference was. He wasn't supposed to interfere. Corporate workers were told not to get personally involved with locals. But looking at the small, blind girl in his arms, he knew those policies were written by people who never touched real life. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl frowned slightly. "I don't know. I think. Leary. My mom called me that." He nodded. "That's a nice name. Do you have one?" "Elias." "Elias. Close enough." He smiled despite himself. She laughed once, a small, uncertain sound. Then, quieter, "She works somewhere with pipes." She smells like soap and metal. All right, he said. We'll start with the filtration decks. She went silent, listening to the faint hum of engines. Then, are you scared of dark places? He glanced down at her. No. What? My mom says the dark makes people show their real faces. He didn't answer. He didn't have one for that. They took a freight lift downward. The transparent walls of the upper city disappeared, replaced by the steel and condensate levels of the maintenance tiers. The air turned heavier, humid. Every exhale fogged the elevator glass. The doors opened to the colony's lower filtration district, where workers maintained the water purification network. The lights flickered between pale green and yellow. Pipes lined the ceilings like roots. The smell of algae mixed with rust. He stepped out, boots splashing through runoff water. A pair of maintenance workers glanced at him, then at the alien girl, and looked away quickly. No one spoke. No one wanted involvement. Leary gripped his jacket. It sounds right, she whispered. Like home. All right, Elias murmured. Let's see. They followed the noise of pumps and valves deeper into the corridor. A thin vapor clouded the air. He could feel the humidity collecting on his skin. When they reached a corner, he stopped. A narrow door, dented and old, flickered with a red warning light above it. Resident access only. He knocked once. Then again. There was a pause. A faint sound, soft footsteps. The door cracked open. A woman stood there, tall and slender, but tired in posture. Her skin was the same lavender hue as the girl's, her hair long and white, tied loosely with a strip of cloth. She wore a torn synth fiber wrap, its thin fabric darkened by damp spots. The smell of cleaning solvent drifted from her hands. Her eyes, pale gray with faint color, widened when she saw what Elias held. "Mom," the girl said. The woman froze. Then she stepped forward and took her daughter from his arms. Clutching her so tightly the child gasped. Her voice cracked. "Leary stars, I thought." She couldn't finish. Elias looked away, giving them space. He'd expected gratitude, maybe confusion. What hit him instead was the exhaustion in the woman's movements. The look of someone who'd been waiting for something awful to happen for too long. When she finally looked up, her voice was cautious. "Who are you?" "Elias Ward, hydrobotanist. I found her near the Market Causeway." "You shouldn't be down here," she said. Her tone wasn't rude, just defensive, protective. "People like you don't come to the filtration decks." He glanced at the rusting walls. Maybe they should. The woman adjusted her daughter on her hip. The child pressed her face into her shoulder, still trembling. "I didn't mean for her to go up there," the woman said, her voice low. "She wanders when she can't sleep. I thought she was in bed." "It happens," Elias said quietly. She shook her head. "Not here. When you're like us, it's not supposed to happen. They call the security sweepers for less." He studied her, sweat on her brow, solvent stains along her wrists, a tension that never left her shoulders. She wasn't weak, just worn out. "What's your name?" he asked. "Naira." He nodded. "She told me she's blind. Since the chemical spill, I was cleaning valves on level 9. One ruptured." Her jaw tightened. The company didn't cover the treatment. Said it was off-duty contamination. He exhaled slowly. Of course they did. Naira looked up sharply, surprised at his tone. Most humans didn't talk like that. Not here. He met her eyes. "I might be able to help her. I work with bioluminal grafts. Plant-based cell repair. It's experimental, but..." Her expression hardened. "You can't risk that. They'll report you." "I'm not asking for permission." Naira stared at him, uncertain if he was serious. She'd seen pity before, never commitment. He adjusted his coat, rainwater dripping from the hem. "You want her to see again, don't you?" Naira's lips parted, but no words came. Her daughter tugged at her hand, whispering, "He's nice, Mom. He doesn't sound afraid." The woman's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. Then she nodded once. Elias gave a brief, quiet smile. "Then let's start tomorrow. I'll bring what I need." He turned to go. Behind him, Naira whispered, "Why are you helping us?" He stopped, hand on the railing, thinking of the faces upstairs, polished, distracted, blind in their own way. "Because everyone else isn't," he said. Then he left, footsteps fading into the hum of the pipes. Inside the small room, Naira held her daughter tighter. Leary rested her head against her mother's shoulder, voice drowsy but sure. "I told you someone would stop," she murmured. "He sounded like someone who grows things." Naira brushed the wet hair from her face, heart still racing. "Let's hope he grows miracles," she whispered. The turbines roared quietly beneath them. Somewhere above, rain kept falling. The next morning began in the colony's gray light. Moisture clung to every surface. The lower decks always felt half awake, half drowned. Dr. Elias Ward moved through the service corridor with a sealed crate balanced against his shoulder. Inside were the illegal components for a bioluminal graft, nutrient gels, sterile mesh, and a portable light stabilizer cannibalized from his hydrolab. He had spent most of the night cleaning and modifying it in silence, ignoring the surveillance alerts pinging his terminal. He wasn't sure why he cared this much. That question, why them, had followed him since last night. It wasn't about pity. It was something heavier. Maybe it was because he had watched too many people disappear into the quiet machinery of Aurelian Reach. Maybe because this was the first time in years he'd seen someone fight to keep something alive. When he reached Naira's quarters, the door was already open. The air inside was warmer than before, scented faintly with cooked root broth. The small room looked different in daylight, still poor but organized. The walls were patched with scavenged insulation, and the floor had been scrubbed until it almost shined. Naira stood by the small stove, her long white hair still damp from washing. The thin wrap she wore was clean now, tied tighter at the waist with a cloth band. When she turned toward him, her posture was wary but no longer hostile. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." She glanced at the crate in his hands. "If someone catches you with that, you'll lose your position. Maybe worse." He set it down beside the table. "Then let's make it worth the risk." From the cot, little Leary stirred. Her cloudy eyes blinked open at the sound of his voice. "You're the man who talks like quiet rain," she said sleepily. Elias smiled faintly. "You have a good memory." She remembers sound, Naira explained, her tone softening. "Every tone, every footstep. She used to guide me by sound when I worked night shifts." The girl reached out both hands, tried to find the edge of the crate. "Is that for me?" Elias crouched down beside her. "It's something that might help you see again, but it's tricky. I'll need your mom's permission first." Naira hesitated, arms folded. "You said it's experimental. How dangerous is it?" "On paper, too dangerous for a child. In practice, it's worked on lab subjects. Never on someone this young. What happens if it fails?" "She'll stay the same. I won't let it make her worse." Naira watched him as he spoke, her eyes narrowing slightly, not with distrust, but with calculation. He spoke like someone who had done this before, maybe not this exact procedure, but something close. "You've tried this," she said. "Haven't you?" He looked away briefly. "On a miner from Ceros Prime. Chemical retinal corrosion." He got back half his vision. Then the corporation shut the project down. Naira's voice softened, but her expression didn't. "Why?" "Too expensive. Too human," he said quietly, pulling open the crate. The words hung between them for a moment. Naira stepped closer, kneeling beside him. The equipment reflected faint green light from the nutrient gel inside. Her breath hitched slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of hope she didn't want to feel. "What do you need?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Clean water, light, and you." They worked together, clearing space on the small table. The procedure wasn't surgery, not in the formal sense, but it required precision. He unfolded the sterile cloth, set out the vials, and checked the stabilizer's hum. Leary sat still, trusting him completely, small hands gripping her doll. "Is it going to hurt?" she asked. "A little," he admitted, "but you're stronger than you look." "I'm small, not weak," she said firmly. He smiled. "Good. That helps." As he began applying the chlorcell mesh, Naira stood behind him, holding the stabilizer steady. Her hands trembled slightly. The faint scent of solvent clung to her skin, mixing with the sharp tang of sterilized gel. The graft pulsed faintly as he adjusted the microfilm across the girl's eyes, connecting the biocircuit to the optic nerve region. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the hum of the lights and the girl's measured breathing. Elias felt sweat slide down his temple, the kind that came from focus, not fear. His hands didn't shake. He had done harder things on people who meant less. When he finished the graft, he stepped back and exhaled slowly. Done. She'll need to rest for 12 hours. Then we'll remove the covers. Naira crouched beside her daughter, brushing a thumb over her forehead. You did well, Leary. I'm proud of you. The girl smiled faintly. It didn't hurt much. He talks calm. It makes it smaller. Elias turned away, busying himself with cleaning the tools. He didn't want her to see the tightness in his jaw. There was something about her trust that cut deeper than gratitude. After he packed up, Naira handed him a mug of broth. The smell was earthy, simple, real. You need to eat, she said. He sat on the edge of the table. You cook. Sometimes. Mostly for her. I eat what's left. He tasted it. It was weak but hot. You worked in sanitation before? She nodded. Upper tower maintenance. When the leak happened, they moved me down here. I didn't have a choice. And no one reported it? Her eyes hardened. Reporting things gets you noticed. Being noticed gets you replaced. He said nothing. The logic of survival here wasn't foreign to him. He'd seen it on every colony. Rules that looked clean on paper and killed quietly in practice. When the silence stretched, Naira leaned forward, studying him. Why risk your job for us? Elias set down the mug. Because I believe in things that grow back. Her gaze softened. You talk like someone who lost something. He met her eyes. Everyone here has. Before she could answer, Leary spoke again, voice sleepy. I heard you both breathing. It sounded like you're friends now. Naira laughed quietly, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. Maybe we are. He glanced at them both, the tired mother, the resting child, and something in him settled, like the click of a lock sliding into place. He stood, shouldering his crate. I'll come back tonight. Don't remove the covers before I do. Naira rose too. You think this will work? He hesitated. I think she'll open her eyes and see something new. Whether that's light or shadow, we'll find out. When he left, the corridor outside was almost silent. The colony lights flickered through the fogged glass panels, and his reflection blurred against the rain. For the first time in months, Elias didn't feel like he was walking toward another routine shift. He felt like he was walking toward something that mattered. Back inside, Naira watched her daughter sleep beneath the faint green glow of the stabilizer. She placed her hand over the child's chest, feeling the small rhythm beneath. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make her afraid. By the time Elias returned that evening, the corridor lights were dimmed to conserve power. The lower filtration decks always looked different after shift hours, emptier, slower, as if the entire system was trying to sleep. Condensation dripped rhythmically from overhead pipes, landing in shallow puddles that reflected dull green light. He carried a smaller case this time. Sterile wipes, sensor lenses, a portable scanner. The unauthorized equipment from earlier had already been cleaned and disguised inside his official hydrolab manifests. It wasn't foolproof, but it would keep suspicion away for now. As he approached Naira's door, he hesitated for a second. His heartbeat was steady, but there was a pressure in his chest, a strange awareness of what he'd done. It wasn't regret. It was the understanding that this was no longer a random act of kindness. The moment he'd installed that graft, he'd crossed a line that couldn't be undone. He knocked lightly. The door opened a few seconds later. Naira stood there, her posture relaxed, but eyes sharp, like she'd been listening to every footstep in the corridor. Her hair was untied tonight, long and straight, still damp from washing. The soft light behind her made her lavender skin almost luminous. She's awake, she said. He stepped inside. The air was warmer, humid from the steam of boiling water. A faint smell of cooked meat filled the space. Reef stag cuts sizzling on a small pan. It was the first real scent of food he'd noticed here. Leary sat on the cot, her eyes still covered with bandage wraps. She was humming quietly to herself, one hand tracing patterns on the doll's frayed fabric. Hey, little listener, Elias said softly. She turned her head toward his voice. You said 12 hours. It's been more. He smiled. Someone's been counting. I can hear the colony clocks, she said seriously. They sound like drops of metal. He set the case down on the table. You ready to see again? Naira's voice broke the quiet. If it doesn't work, you'll tell us the truth? Yes, he said simply. The woman nodded and knelt beside her daughter, steadying her hands. Elias crouched in front of them, adjusting the light stabilizer. His movements were slow and deliberate, the way surgeons work when they don't want to let hope interfere with precision. He loosened the first strip of bandage, then the second. The girl blinked rapidly, her pupils dilating, reacting to light. He tilted the lamp slightly, lowering brightness to reduce shock. "Open your eyes slowly," he said. Her eyelids fluttered. Then she froze, staring straight ahead. At first, there was only confusion, a reflexive tightening of her jaw, a tremor in her small hands. Then her breathing hitched. Her mouth parted. "I see light," she whispered. "It's moving." Elias leaned closer. The corneal mesh was holding. Thin veins of green luminescence ran across the iris, pulsing faintly like living threads. She blinked again, eyes clearing as the implant synchronized. "There's a shape. It's her." Naira covered her mouth, choking on a breath. The girl reached up, touching her mother's face. Her small fingers traced the curve of her cheek, then her lips confirming what she was seeing. "You're real," she said in disbelief. "You look tired." Naira laughed and cried at once. "You always said that, even before you could see me." Leary turned her head toward Elias, studying him. "You look different than I thought. You have quiet eyes." He exhaled slowly. "I'll take that as a compliment." She smiled, wide and unguarded. For a moment, the sound of turbines faded behind the stillness in the room. It wasn't just relief. It was the heavy silence of something irreversible. Elias stood up, feeling his pulse slow as the realization settled in. It had worked. Naira brushed her daughter's hair back, still trembling. "She'll be able to keep the sight." "She will," he said. "There might be adjustment pain, flashes, or headaches for a few days, but her vision will stabilize." Naira let out a long breath, part disbelief, part release. "You actually did it." "I told you," he said quietly, "some things can grow back." The girl leaned against her mother's shoulder, eyelids fluttering from exhaustion. Elias started packing his tools, but Naira stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Stay for dinner," she said. He hesitated, surprised. "I made enough," she added, glancing toward the small stove. "It's not much, but—" He nodded. "I'd like that." They ate sitting close to the floor, plates balanced on metal crates. The meal was simple: seared reef stag strips, boiled larn roots, a few slices of preserved fruit. But it tasted clean, almost alive. Naira's daughter ate slowly, staring at everything with fascination. The glow of the heat lamp, the shape of steam rising from the pot, the shadow of her own hands. Every few seconds, she whispered something new. "The wall looks wet. The light hums. Your shirt's green." Naira laughed softly, brushing her daughter's hair. Elias watched them both silent. For the first time since arriving at Aurelian Reach, the food didn't taste like processed ration paste. It tasted like purpose. After dinner, Naira began cleaning the plates. Elias helped without asking, wiping the table and sealing leftover broth into small metal jars. When their hands brushed, she didn't pull away immediately. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "You risked everything for a child you didn't know." Elias looked down at his hands, then at the child sleeping nearby. "You ever see a plant try to grow through concrete?" She frowned. "You're saying we're weeds?" He shook his head. "I'm saying you're alive, even where nothing's supposed to be." Naira didn't answer, but the corners of her mouth lifted, barely visible, but there. When he left later that night, the city above was dark, a storm building over the ocean. He moved through the empty walkways with his coat zipped up, feeling the rain hit his face. He hadn't planned to stay involved after this, but the image of the girl opening her eyes, of Naira's trembling hands, wouldn't leave his mind. The corporation had made him believe change required systems, approval data. Tonight, he'd watched it happen with a single act of defiance. Back in his quarters, Elias sat on the edge of his bunk, the sound of turbines filling the silence. He glanced at the report forms waiting on his tablet, the official maintenance logs he was supposed to submit. Instead, he powered it off. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and for the first time since coming to Aurelian Reach, felt something unfamiliar. Not duty, not guilt, something closer to peace. The next few days passed quietly. Aurelian Reach kept its rhythm, shifts changing, turbines echoing through the decks, air filters humming in constant motion. But in the small quarters on the lower levels, time felt slower. For once, it was not survival dictating the hours, but recovery. Elias returned each evening after his hydrolab duties, careful to vary his route through the filtration corridors. He had begun to notice things that made him uneasy, subtle signs of scrutiny. Questions about missing materials from his inventory logs, new administrative codes on his work terminal, a colleague's polite curiosity about how the research was going. Nothing direct, but enough to remind him that what he'd done wasn't invisible. Still, every time he reached Naira's door, the unease eased. The sound of the child's laughter always cut through the industrial hum like clean air. That night, when he entered, the place was brighter. The dim yellow lamps had been replaced with improvised bioluminal strips, repurposed from nutrient vine samples he'd left behind. Their soft green glow crawled up the walls, turning the room into a garden of light. Leary sat on the cot, tracing the glow with her fingertips. Her eyes, now fully healed, shimmered with subtle green reflections from the graft. When she saw him, she smiled wide. "Elias, I counted 20 lights before you came," she said proudly. He smiled back. "You're getting faster." Naira turned from the stove, a small smile on her lips. She refuses to sleep until she finishes her counting patrol. "It's important," Leary said firmly. "If the lights go out, I'll tell you." Elias knelt beside her. "You can really see them all clearly?" She nodded eagerly. "They move a little when I blink, but they don't go away. The world has edges now." Her words hit him harder than expected. Edges. That was how a child described the return of reality. Naira handed him a cup of steaming liquid. "Ferlin seed coffee," she said. "It's weak, but it's all I could trade for." He took a sip. The taste was bitter, earthy, with a faint sweetness. "It's perfect." They sat together at the table while Leary hummed softly to herself, still tracing light on the wall. The woman's shoulders looked less tense now. Her movements were slower, more deliberate. The exhaustion that had defined her face seemed to have faded, replaced by something quieter, caution mixed with relief. "She's been asking about the world outside," Naira said. "She wants to see the ocean. But down here, we can't even see daylight." Elias nodded. "There's an old maintenance deck on the mid-level that overlooks the outer turbines. It's not exactly the beach, but it's the closest thing we've got." Naira studied him carefully. "You take her there?" "Yes. Safely. No one goes there after hours. It's quiet." "Quiet usually means forbidden," she said with a half-smile. "Then we'll go quietly," he replied. That made her laugh, a rare sound, soft but real. Later, when Leary fell asleep curled beside her doll, Elias helped Naira secure the hydro lights for the night. Their hands brushed once as they adjusted the panels, both pretending not to notice. "You work in the upper decks," she said after a moment. "You must have family there." He shook his head. "No one waiting. No one at all. Not anymore." He hesitated, then added, "I used to have a sister. She died on a terraforming site on Tethys 4. Equipment malfunction. The company called it operator error." Naira looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You tried to help her, didn't you?" "I was off-world," he said quietly. "By the time I heard, it was already over." She placed a hand on his arm, gentle but firm. "That's why you helped us." "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I was just tired of doing nothing." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that happens when two people understand something without saying it. When he stood to leave, Naira walked him to the door. The corridor outside was damp with condensation, the low fog moving like breath. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go to that deck." He nodded. "I'll bring food. Something better than larn broth." Her smile widened faintly. "You're full of promises, human. And I keep them," he said. When the door closed behind him, Naira stood there for a long moment, listening to the distant thrum of turbines. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped by that sound. It didn't mean survival anymore. It meant continuity, a heartbeat beneath the city. The next evening, he kept his promise. He brought a small parcel wrapped in heat foil, grilled reef stag meat, sliced Draxon mushrooms, and 2 small loaves of Zyron bread. Leary's eyes went wide when she saw it. "This smells better than the air," she exclaimed. Elias chuckled. That's the right reaction. They ate together, sitting on a maintenance platform that overlooked the deep blue expanse below the city. Through the transparent barrier, the ocean shimmered under the colony's lights, vast and motionless. Leary pressed her hands to the glass, eyes full of wonder. "It looks like it's breathing," she said. Naira leaned closer, her reflection faintly visible beside her daughter's. "It's the sea current. It keeps this place alive." Elias watched them both, feeling something shift inside him. The way Naira stood, steady, proud again, wasn't the same woman he'd met. The exhaustion hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled her. "You've changed her life," Naira said suddenly, eyes still on the ocean. "And mine." He shook his head. "You were already surviving. I just made it visible." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Do you ever stop thinking like a scientist?" He smiled faintly. "Not often." "Then you should try. Sometimes it's simpler to say what you feel." He met her gaze. For a moment, neither looked away. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden spark, just a quiet recognition between two people who had both gone too long without being seen. When the girl finally dozed off in her mother's lap, Elias adjusted the small coat he'd brought, draping it over them both. The lights from the colony reflected in their hair, white and soft like frost. As he sat beside them, watching the dark waves far below, he realized the question that had followed him since the day he arrived. The one about purpose finally had an answer. It wasn't about fixing systems or proving theories. It was about this. Small, unrecorded acts that no one would ever credit him for, but which mattered anyway. Back in the lab, the next morning, Elias noticed a new message waiting on his screen. Supervisor Inquiry. Inventory Discrepancy. Level 17 Hydromaterials. He closed it immediately. He knew what it meant. Someone had begun connecting the dots. Still, as he looked out over the vast greenhouse towers, sunlight refracting through layers of mist, he didn't feel fear, only resolve. He'd built something fragile, yes, but it was alive, and he intended to protect it. The next morning, the colony's artificial dawn rose through the mist like a pale, filtered pulse. Light refracted across the ocean's surface, bleeding upward through the glass foundations of Aurelian Reach. The higher towers glimmered, indifferent. Below, in the decks where the air smelled of salt and iron, the day began with the hiss of steam valves and the slow return of human voices. Elias Ward leaned against the railing outside his lab, his coffee cooling in his hand. The message from the night before still hovered on his tablet screen. Supervisor Inquiry. Inventory Discrepancy. Level 17 Hydromaterials. He had drafted a reply 3 times, deleting each version. Any lie detailed enough to sound believable risked becoming traceable later. Any silence would invite scrutiny. He scrolled to the system logs. Someone had already flagged his access history. The timestamp matched the night of the graph procedure. His chest tightened. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think like a scientist again. Calm, systematic, precise. If he panicked, he'd make mistakes. If he moved too late, Naira and Leary would pay for his recklessness. He closed the report, shut down the console, and went back to work as if nothing had happened. By the time he finished his midday maintenance run, he'd made a decision. He wasn't going to hide forever. That evening, when he arrived at Naira's quarters, the door was already open. Leary's laughter echoed through the narrow corridor, bright and clear. "Elias," she called the moment she saw him. "Mom says I can read now. Not books, but signs. The ones that glow." He crouched down, smiling despite the weight in his chest. "That's faster than I expected." She pointed proudly at the flickering sign outside their door. "Maint 24B. See? It says main table." "Close enough," he said. "You'll run the colony by next month." Naira stepped into the doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her eyes found his face immediately. She noticed the tension there, the small cracks in his calm. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. Elias hesitated, then nodded. Someone's noticed the missing lab materials. Naira's expression didn't change. How much do they know? Not enough. Yet, her shoulders squared. Then we have time. He looked at her, almost surprised by her composure. You're not afraid? I've lived afraid for years, she said. This is different. Fear is when you're waiting for something to take what's left of you. This feels like having something worth protecting. Her words hit harder than any reprimand he'd ever received in the sterile upper decks. He wanted to answer, but Leary interrupted, tugging his sleeve. Are we in trouble? She asked. Elias knelt again, steadying his voice. Not if we're careful. Leary nodded solemnly, then whispered, If they come, can I hide in the light pipes? They hum like songs. Naira shook her head. No one's coming, little one. She met Elias's gaze. Right? He wished he could promise that. Instead, he changed the subject. I brought food. Fresh this time. He opened the parcel. Strips of grilled reef stag, roasted Draxon mushrooms, and 2 ration bars coated in fermented syrup. Leary's eyes lit up instantly. 2 days in a row, Naira said, almost smiling. If you keep this up, she'll start thinking you're a chef. I'll retire early then, he said dryly. They ate together, the air filled with the faint crackle of the stove. Leary sat between them, occasionally feeding small pieces of meat to her doll. It was ordinary, domestic, something neither of them had known in years. When the child finally drifted to sleep, Naira stayed seated, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on the faint glow of the hydro strips. You said they're watching your records. How long before they come down here? Maybe days, he said. Maybe tonight. The inquiry went to corporate administration. They don't investigate like normal departments. They just erase what doesn't fit protocol. Naira's voice dropped. Erase. He met her eyes. People disappear here, Naira. Not killed, relocated, rewritten out of the system. I've seen it happen. She stood, pacing once. Then what do? He leaned forward. We stay quiet, but we prepare. If they trace the graft, it'll lead to this room. We need to remove all evidence, the stabilizer, the mesh residue, everything. And if it comes to it, he paused. You both might need to move. Naira looked down at the sleeping child. Move where? We're not registered. Without documentation, she'll be marked defective again. I'll find something, Elias said. They're outer transport rings. Old freight pods the upper decks don't monitor. I could get you off this level, maybe out to the hydro canopies. They're unguarded at night. Naira crossed her arms. You'd risk your career for us again. He met her gaze. I already did. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with the low hum of turbines and distant rain against metal. Then she moved closer, standing beside him. You could still walk away, she said softly. I don't want to. Her voice lowered even more. Why? He didn't answer right away. His hand brushed against hers on the table. It wasn't a calculated gesture, just the natural result of 2 people sharing the same breath for too long. Because this feels real, he said finally. More real than anything I've done up there. For the first time, Naira didn't pull away. She looked at him as if weighing every unspoken word, then nodded slightly and turned toward the stove. Then if we're going to disappear, we eat first. He almost smiled. Agreed. As they cleared the table, Elias noticed a faint vibration underfoot, a subtle change in the turbine rhythm. He froze, listening. It was nothing dramatic, just a brief surge, like a new sequence initiating in the colony grid. But to someone who'd spent years working with systems, it meant only one thing. A sweep had started. He forced his tone steady. Naira, do you ever get inspection runs through this corridor? She looked at him sharply. No. Why? He gestured upward. The sound grew louder, rhythmic. Not random movement, patterned. Drone scanning for heat signatures. Her face drained of color. They're here already. He moved quickly, grabbing his case and shoving his personal tablet inside. Take Leary. Get her ready. We'll move toward the old turbine shafts. But those are sealed. Not all of them. He crouched beside the sleeping child, lifting her gently. She stirred, mumbling softly. Is it morning? Not yet, he said. We're just going to see the lights again. Naira threw a long shawl over her shoulders, pulling the child close. The faint hum above grew sharper, Closer. Elias glanced toward the ceiling vent, watching for the telltale blue scan pulse. When it flickered faintly, he whispered, "Go." They slipped into the maintenance tunnel behind the quarters. The walls were slick with condensation, the floor grid steel. He led them through narrow turns and forgotten routes he'd mapped weeks earlier while calibrating pressure valves. Behind them, a soft mechanical voice echoed through the corridor. Section sweep complete. Unauthorized biosignature detected. Leary pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. Naira whispered, "She's scared." "So am I," Elias said, "but we keep moving." By the time they reached the access ladder leading to the upper turbine platforms, the sound had faded. The air here was colder, thinner, carrying the scent of seawater and machinery. Naira clutched the railing, breathing hard. "What now?" Elias looked out across the glass corridor far below, the glowing veins of the colony cutting through mist like nervous tissue. Now he vanished long enough for them to stop looking. Naira met his eyes, her voice low and resolute. "And after that," he tightened his grip on the ladder. "After that, we find a place that isn't afraid of the broken." Lightning flared outside the dome, lighting the ocean far beneath them. For a single second, their faces reflected in the glass. Human and alien, tired and alive, holding on to something fragile yet unbreakable. And as the storm spread across Aurelian Reach, Elias realized what he feared most wasn't being caught. It was losing what he'd just begun to believe in. Rain hammered the outer dome of Aurelian Reach like static. The city's sound, turbines, ventilation hum, distant freight drones, blurred into a continuous mechanical pulse. Elias crouched behind a turbine housing, breath slow but measured, while Naira and Leary huddled under his coat. Steam vented in long bursts from the pipes above them, masking heat signatures. They'd been hiding there for almost 20 minutes. The inspection drones had swept the lower corridors, scanning for trace anomalies. Elias knew the patterns by heart. He'd helped design parts of those detection systems years ago. He listened now for the faint descending whine that meant the machines were moving on. When it finally came, he exhaled, lowering his voice. "They're heading back up. For now, we're clear." Naira's grip tightened on his sleeve. Her voice came out low, tense. "For now isn't enough. How long before they realize where we've gone?" Elias looked past her, toward the service bridge stretching into mist. Beyond it, faint green light pulsed through condensation, a maintenance canopy leading to one of the hydro gardens. "If we reach that platform, we can disappear for a while. No surveillance up there. It's too damp for their optics to read." Leary shifted, eyes wide and alert. "Are we running away forever?" He crouched beside her. "Not forever, just until the machines forget." The child nodded as if it made sense. Naira pulled her closer, whispering something quiet in their native tongue, the syllables soft and melodic even in fear. They moved. The bridge ahead was narrow, a mesh walkway suspended above the endless drop of the colony's underbelly. Steam and rain blurred the edges, making the path look like it dissolved into fog. Elias went first, boots echoing against the steel grating. He knew every meter here. He'd calibrated the nutrient lines that ran beneath this section. Halfway across, the colony lights flickered. The hum of turbines deepened. A system reboot. Elias froze. The sudden silence between pulses meant only one thing. The sweep cycle had restarted. He turned sharply. "Move faster." Naira obeyed without question, holding Leary close, her long hair whipping in the wet wind. When they reached the canopy entrance, Elias forced the lock panel open with a magnetic override chip. The door slid sideways with a grinding sound. He ushered them inside. The interior was darker, quieter. Rows of bioluminal vines stretched upward, their leaves glowing with faint turquoise light. Water trickled from overhead sprinklers, pooling softly on the floor. It smelled like earth and salt and metal, a rare combination in a world built mostly from glass and steel. Leary looked around in awe. "It's like the lights grew into plants." Elias smiled faintly. "That's not far from the truth." He moved through the rows, checking the equipment panels. Most were dormant. This section hadn't been used in months. Perfect. He deactivated the main power link, leaving only the bioluminal glow. Then he turned back to Naira and Leary. We'll stay here tonight. It's safe enough. Naira sat beside a nutrient basin, placing Leary down gently. Safe, she repeated, almost to herself. Her tone was cautious, as if the word itself might vanish if spoken too loudly. Elias set his coat on a pipe and checked the case he'd carried through the storm. Inside were tools, ration packets, and a small heating core. He activated it, and a low amber light spread warmth through the misty air. Naira's eyes followed his movements. You planned for this. I prepare, he said simply. It's the only reason I'm still alive. She didn't argue. Instead, she studied him for a moment longer, the sharpness of her features softened by exhaustion. You could have left us behind, she said quietly. Most people would have. I told you before, he said. I don't walk away. She looked down, rubbing her palms together for warmth. You sound like someone who keeps promises even when it hurts. Elias didn't answer. He focused on setting up the heater, but the words lingered. Leary crawled closer to the light, watching it flicker. Does it talk too? She asked. Not yet, Elias said with a faint smile. But I'll teach it. Naira laughed quietly, the sound catching her by surprise. It was small but genuine, something alive breaking through the tension. She tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, glancing at him. You have strange humor for a scientist. Helps me stay human, he said. Silence followed. Not the tense kind, but something gentler. The bioluminal vines swayed in the recycled air currents, their glow washing over their faces in soft waves of green-blue light. Naira finally spoke again. When you worked up there, before all this, what did you want? He thought about it for a moment. To make things grow, to prove that even on the edge of nowhere, life could adapt. But after a while, it became just another assignment. Data, metrics, reports. No one cared why things grew, only how much profit they produced. And now, he looked at her directly. Now I care why again. Her eyes didn't leave his. Because of us? He hesitated, then nodded once. Because of you, the air between them thickened. Not with fear this time, but with understanding. Naira looked away first, reaching for her daughter's blanket. You should rest, she said. You've done enough tonight. But when she turned back, he was already sitting beside her, leaning against the same metal wall. Their shoulders touched lightly, warmth passing between them through the damp fabric. Neither moved away. For the first time since the sweep began, Naira's breathing slowed. She looked toward the vines, whispering, If they find us, what then? Then they'll find a botanist and his 2 lab assistants, Elias said calmly. That's what the registry will show once I rewrite it. She blinked, surprised. You can do that. I can do many things when I have reason. Naira studied his face, then let out a quiet breath. And what reason do you have now? Elias met her gaze. You. Her throat tightened, but she didn't reply. Instead, she shifted closer, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. The gesture was small, cautious, but it felt like something monumental had just happened. Outside, the storm raged across the dome, but inside the hydro canopy, everything was still. Leary slept between them, wrapped in her mother's shawl, the faint light painting slow patterns across her face. Elias didn't close his eyes. He watched the vines sway and listened to the rhythm of their breathing, the fragile, quiet proof that they were still here. He knew the drones would sweep again by morning. He knew the system wouldn't stop until it restored order. But for now, in this pocket of stolen calm, the world had boundaries that made sense. Warmth, breath, trust. And in that silence, Elias realized something else. He hadn't just saved them. He'd found the first thing worth breaking every rule for. The hydro canopy held its silence until dawn. The storm outside had weakened to a distant hiss against the dome. Condensation dripped from the curved glass above them, collecting into small ripples that distorted the reflections of the bioluminal vines. Elias was already awake, sitting against the steel support frame, watching Naira and Leary sleep. The child's head rested against her mother's lap. Both breathed in slow, steady rhythm. He checked his wrist display. 4:26. The sweep cycle would resume in 2 hours. He couldn't stay hidden here any longer. His mind went back to the security logs. They wouldn't stop searching. Drones were only the first step. After that came field investigators, human inspectors with clearance to question anyone. If they found this canopy active again after months of dormancy, it would draw attention. He rubbed the back of his neck, his thoughts heavy but deliberate. He needed a plan that didn't involve running forever. There was one way to erase their trace completely. Access the central biosystem's core and delete the registry data from the night of the graft. It was dangerous, but it would work. He rose quietly. The motion stirred Naira awake. Her voice was low, still rough from sleep. "You're leaving." He turned, surprised she'd noticed. "Just for a few hours. I need to fix this from the inside before the sweeps get worse." Naira sat up slowly, careful not to wake her daughter. "And if they catch you, then they'll arrest a botanist for mismanaging lab inventory," he said dryly. "They won't look for a woman and child who don't officially exist." She stared at him, expression unreadable. "You make it sound simple. It has to be." She stood and stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the damp metal floor. "Elias, if something happens, it won't." But the lie was thin, and they both knew it. He reached into his pack, pulled out a small pendant, an access chip disguised as a rusted tag, and pressed it in her palm. "If you need to move again, find corridor N, 4 on this level. There's a vent system that connects to the old cargo tunnels. You'll be safe there." She didn't look at the chip. Instead, she studied his face. "You're not coming back here tonight, are you?" "I'll try," he said. She didn't answer. She just nodded once and closed her fingers around the pendant. When he left, Leary stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Her voice, half asleep, murmured, "Come back, okay? You still owe me a real ocean." He paused and smiled faintly. "I'll bring it to you," he whispered and slipped into the mist. The colony was half awake by the time he reached the mid-level access rings. Workers moved along the corridors, their boots echoing off steel. No one looked twice at him. He wore his lab coat, his ID pass clipped in plain sight. Normalcy was the best disguise. He entered the Hydro Systems Control Center through a side hatch. Rows of consoles stretched before him, their interfaces glowing faint blue. The air smelled of coolant and ozone. He found the terminal he needed, a restricted admin port behind the filtration core. He connected his wrist display, bypassing the layered encryptions one by one. The system recognized his credentials immediately. Years of loyal service had their benefits. The deeper he went into the files, the clearer the problem became. The system hadn't just flagged his graph materials. It had cross-linked them with external biosignature data, Naira and Leary. Their genetic readings were still stored in the colony database, automatically logged when they'd entered any scan sector. Even if he wiped his access logs, their records would remain as proof. He stared at the display, pulse steady, thoughts sharp. There was one solution: erase the biological registry entirely. But that would also delete a portion of the colony's active medical data, something that would be noticed immediately. He exhaled through his teeth. "One clean cut," he muttered. "No second chances." His fingers moved fast over the interface, executing override commands. Lights flickered as the system rerouted. Data lines scrolled across the screen, codes, timestamps, registry IDs. Then, deletion protocol authorized. Confirm? He hesitated for less than a second, then pressed yes. The hum of the room deepened as the biosystem core recalibrated. A single progress bar crawled across the screen, slow and silent. When it reached 100%, Elias unplugged the device and powered down the terminal. The database would show a hardware fault. No human trace of Naira or Leary would remain in any registry. He stayed motionless for a moment, letting the tension leave his body. It was done. As he turned to leave, a voice broke the quiet. "Dr. Ward." He froze. A man stood at the doorway, a supervisor, tall, clean uniformed, his ID badge reflecting the console light. "You're early," Elias said evenly. "I could say the same," the man replied. His tone was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "System flagged your access 3 nights ago. Inventory irregularities. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that." Elias didn't blink. I've been recalibrating the hydro sensors. Faulty readings on levels 15 through 17. You'll see the report soon." The man smiled thinly. "I'm sure I will." He took a step closer, then paused by the inactive console. "Strange. You chose a quiet hour for calibration." "Less interference," Elias said. "Plants don't complain." The supervisor studied him a second longer, then gave a slow nod. "Of course. Carry on, doctor." When he left, Elias stayed still for several minutes, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade. Then he gathered his tools and exited through the maintenance hatch, taking a different route back. By the time he reached the canopy again, the mist had turned to thin drizzle. Naira was awake, waiting near the door. She didn't ask what had happened. She only looked at his face, reading what words couldn't express. "It's done," he said quietly. "They won't find you now." Her shoulders dropped slightly, relief soft but visible. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be." She stepped closer, her voice low. "And you?" He hesitated, then sat down beside the heating core. "They'll keep watching me for a while. After that, they'll move on. I'll stay in the system. You stay off it." Leary stirred from her blanket, rubbing her eyes. "Is the dark gone?" Elias smiled faintly. "For now." The child crawled to him, curling up beside his arm. Naira watched the scene silently, her eyes soft but uncertain. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "I did," he replied. "I said I would." For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence under the faint turquoise light of the vines. Outside, the storm finally broke apart. The colony lights shimmered through the thinning fog like stars scattered across water. Naira's hand found his, fingers tentative but steady. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we stop running." Elias looked at her, at the quiet defiance in her eyes. "Maybe," he said. The hydro canopy felt warmer now. Safe. Not forever, but long enough to mean something. And as the turbines resumed their endless rhythm, Elias finally let his guard drop, just enough to feel what he'd been denying since the night he'd found a lost blind girl on a bridge. That he wasn't alone anymore. Morning came softly through the hydro canopy. The light diffused through layers of mist and glass. The storm had passed completely now. The sky above Aurelian Reach was a pale silver, and the ocean far below shimmered with slow, rhythmic waves. Elias woke to the sound of quiet laughter. Leary's voice, bright but hushed, echoing between the vines. She sat cross-legged near the heating core, holding one of the small bioluminal seedlings he'd cut the night before. It pulsed faint green in her hands, the glow reflecting in her restored eyes. "Look, Mom," she said. "It listens when I talk to it." Naira knelt beside her, a soft smile touching her lips. "It listens because he made it gentle," she said, glancing at Elias. He sat up slowly, stretching his shoulders. The air inside the canopy was damp but warm. "That one's special," he said. "It responds to voices. The more you talk to it, the stronger it glows." Leary's face lit with awe. "Then I'll make it shine forever." He watched her laugh, her hair catching the soft green light. And for the first time since the night he met her, she looked like a child who belonged to the world instead of surviving in its cracks. Naira walked over and handed him a cup of warm broth, the aroma faintly earthy. "There's not much left," she said, "but it's enough." "It's perfect," he said. They sat close, their movements easy now, no longer cautious or tense. The silence between them felt different. It wasn't fear holding it together, but a quiet, shared peace. Naira studied his face for a moment. "You didn't sleep much." "I didn't want to," he admitted. "Not after everything. Feels like if I close my eyes, I'll wake up and this will be gone." "It won't be," she said. "You did it. You erased us." He nodded slowly. "You're free now. No records, no identifiers. As far as the colony is concerned, you don't exist." Her expression softened, but there was something heavy behind her eyes. "And you? You still do." He hesitated. "For now. You'll leave soon," she said, not as a question. Elias looked toward the misted glass wall, where the light shimmered faintly through the vines. "If I stay too long, they'll start asking why I'm never on the upper levels. They'll look for reasons." Naira set the cup down beside him, her voice low. "Then stay until they start asking." After that, leave. But not before we have one normal day. He smiled faintly. A normal day. That's a rare thing here. Then make it rare, she said simply. By midday, they'd left the canopy and climbed toward the outer terraces of Aurelian Reach. The higher they went, the clearer the air became. For once, no alarms sounded, no drones followed. They reached a maintenance balcony overlooking the endless turquoise ocean. Wind moved through Naira's hair. Leary pressed her hands to the transparent railing, staring down at the waves far below. It's so big, she whispered. It looks like it never ends. It doesn't, Elias said. It just keeps changing shape. Naira stood beside him, her voice softer than the wind. That's what you were trying to make, wasn't it? Something that keeps growing, even when everything tries to stop it. He glanced at her. You sound like someone who's been listening. I have, she said. Every word, every silence. He didn't look away this time. Her eyes reflected the same green hue as the sea, the same glow that had once saved her daughter. For a long moment, they stood without speaking. The world around them felt weightless. Nothing left to hide from, no immediate threat, no data logs to erase. Only the low hum of wind turbines and the sound of Leary's laughter drifting on the air. When Naira finally turned to him, her tone was steady. You gave us a life. Don't disappear before you live yours. Elias smiled, small and tired but real. I'll try. She stepped closer. Her hand came up, resting lightly against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the damp fabric of his shirt. No, she said quietly. Don't try. Stay, at least for now. He covered her hand with his own. The gesture wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, a decision made in silence. Then I stay, he said. Below them, the sea shimmered brighter as the colony's mirrors caught the sun. Leary leaned against the railing, her small voice carried by the wind. Mom, Elias, look. The water sparkles when you breathe on the glass. Naira laughed, her shoulders relaxing in a way he hadn't seen before. Elias couldn't help but smile. She's right, he said. Everything here is still alive. They stayed there until the artificial daylight began to dim, the horizon shifting to a muted violet. The colony's night cycle activated, turning the towers into threads of soft gold against the dark sky. Back in the canopy that evening, Leary fell asleep quickly, her small hands clutching the glowing seedling. The room glowed faintly around her, pulsing with the rhythm of her breathing. Elias sat beside Naira near the heating core. The silence between them carried the warmth of shared exhaustion and something unspoken but certain. She'll never have to hide again, he said quietly. Naira turned toward him, her voice steady. Neither will you. He looked at her, at the faint scars on her hands, the clean lines of her face in the glow, the steadiness she'd rebuilt piece by piece. You really believe that? I have to, she said. Otherwise, none of this means anything. He reached for her hand, fingers sliding against hers. This time, she didn't hesitate. Their hands stayed together, unmoving, the warmth between them real and solid. Outside, the colony lights reflected off the ocean, shimmering like thousands of small stars. For once, the sound of the turbines didn't feel mechanical, it felt human, like breathing. Naira leaned against his shoulder. When you found her, did you think it would end like this? Elias shook his head. I thought I was just helping a lost child. And now? He looked down at her, his voice quiet but sure. Now I know I found a family. Naira's eyes softened. She leaned in, closing the small distance between them. Their kiss was brief, slow, certain without rush. When she pulled back, her smile held the kind of peace that doesn't need words. Leary stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, "Don't let the lights go out." Elias looked at her and whispered, "They won't." He reached behind him and adjusted the nutrient valve feeding the vines. The light brightened slightly, spreading through the canopy in a soft, living glow that filled the whole room. Naira rested her head back on his shoulder, and he closed his eyes, letting the quiet hum of life fill the space between them. Outside, the ocean reflected the colony's lights like a field of stars, endless and steady. The storm was gone, the records erased, the fear dissolved. What remained was fragile, Simple, human, three lives bound together not by survival anymore, but by choice. And as the night settled fully over Aurelian Reach, the hydro canopy pulsed with life, its soft light flickering like a heartbeat, proof that something lost had finally, truly grown back.